All right, Tifos, we're counting down now to the end of the holiday season. And for you last-minute shoppers out there, I've got the perfect solution. RareAndRetroSoccer.com. Rare and Retro Soccer is America's first buy, sell, trade soccer jersey store. And their selection is truly remarkable. Here in Charlotte on Saturday the 16th, new kits dropped. A Christian Pulisic Dortmund kit, a Lionel Messi Argentina kit, another Messi kit, this one Barcelona, a Mo Salah kit, Casemiro, Neymar as well with Brazil, just to name a few. And of course, you can get Charlotte FC gear and Charlotte Independence gear as well. Use coupon code SoccerShow15 at checkout or go to Rare and Retro Soccer, located on Providence Road in South Charlotte. Mention Charlotte Soccer Show while you're there, and you'll receive the 15% off as well. This is a perfect last-minute gift for the soccer lover in your life. Make sure you take advantage of this awesome deal. And thanks to Rare and Retro Soccer for partnering with us right here on Charlotte Soccer Show. And now, a special episode. All right, Danny, it is time to welcome our special guest. He's the Athletic's Gregg Evans. He's a reporter for The Athletic. He covers both Liverpool and Aston Villa. He's been on the Aston Villa beat, though, for many years. He's a co-host of the 1874 podcast as well. Thank you so much for joining Charlotte Soccer Show. It's great to see you.
Pleasure. Thank you very much for having me on. You've got a very good guy in charge, so I'm happy to go over a few things about it.
Yes, so Dean Smith is the subject matter on today's podcast, and we're going to talk about Dean Smith, who spent a lot of time with Aston Villa and had tremendous success there. And we want to figure out why and how that success happened, and whether that can translate here to Charlotte FC. Gregg's had a long day. He was at the Europa game yesterday in Belgium, and now he's traveled back to his home in the UK, and he's kind enough to take a few minutes with us. So first and foremost, what I want to ask you, Gregg, is you saw the news come across X or wherever you saw the news about Dean Smith signing on with Charlotte FC. What was your reaction when you saw that?
Yeah, a bit of a mixture, really. A little bit surprised, because I thought that he would have opportunities in England to consider. I know there were a fair few clubs that he talked to over the time since he's been out of a job, but I know he likes it over in the States. So I knew at some point that he would, consider a job over there. Just didn't expect it to be right now, for a variety of reasons. But his son plays over at a club. Not sure the club he plays for, but he travels over. That's right. Yeah. He travels over quite regularly to see him. So the family like it over in the States. So it's not a massive surprise, but really excited to see how he gets on, because from his time in the West Midlands, working as the Warsaw manager and the Aston Villa manager, got to know him a little bit, and really enjoyed his company.
Yeah, so you spent a decade at the Birmingham Mail covering West Midlands football. You covered 6 managers at Villa, 3 ownership groups. Of course, the championship promotion as well, relegation. You saw it all, and Dean Smith was a huge part of that. When you think about your time covering Aston Villa, and specifically Dean Smith, how did he stand out compared to, obviously we know what's happening right now with Aston Villa, an unbelievable run of success near the top of the Premier League, had to have a chance to go top of the Premier League this weekend. But during that time covering Aston Villa, what made Dean Smith stick out compared to everybody else?
I'll get onto that very shortly, but there was one really nice moment. A couple of weeks ago, Dean Smith was doing some co-commentary work for one of the broadcasters, and Aston Villa were playing, and he actually interviewed Unai Emery, the current Villa manager, before the game, and the exchange that the pair had. Emery said to Dean Smith, "Thanks for everything," which I just thought was a really nice touch, because a lot of this Villa team has been built, in years that have gone by, and Dean Smith played a big part of that. If I look back to his time at Villa, he came to the club when they were in a really difficult position. They were struggling in the Championship, the second tier, actually closer to the relegation zone, I think, than the top six at that point. But he came in and he steadied the ship. He went through things in a very sort of unique, down-to-earth way. It was quite interesting, actually, when Villa got into the Premier League, and as a group of reporters, we all got together and we were discussing all the managers in the Premier League. And what we used to say about Dean was that he was just the most sort of down-to-earth, normal, humble manager out of the group. And it's unusual you see that, and hopefully you guys will get to know him a little bit in the times ahead. But what you'll realise is that just the bottom line is that he's just a really good guy, a very, very good manager as well, which we'll get into. But just somebody who you can go for a beer with, or someone you can have a good conversation with as well.
Hey, Greg, want to say thanks for coming on.
Loves his golf as well. I don't know if you guys are into golf, but
I did read that. I was doing some research. I read your article on The Athletic from a couple years ago, promotion, survival, and a halftime dressing down at Stoke. At Villa, which is a really nice piece, by the way. And I saw that you mentioned golf in there, and a light bulb went off in my head. I said, "Oh, we got to get Dean Smith out of the golf course." We certainly play a lot of golf down in the Carolinas here.
I didn't ever get to have a game with him, but he loves his golf.
Yeah, I'm seeing a foursome with you, me, Dino, and Westwood, John. I love it, absolutely, for sure. I know he's been getting after it for his time here. Greg, welcome to the show. Thank you for talking to us today. And I know that now that you're covering such a powerhouse, contending Premier League title club like Villa, it's nice of you to also slip in some extra coverage of a little club like Liverpool as your side gig. That's very classy and giving back to the community of you as a journalist, for sure.
Are you on your 10th beer here?
I am on my first beer. I'm drinking the Mayor. This is a local brew that we do here in Charlotte. The club. This is actually courtesy of the club. The club gave me this beer as a Christmas gift, if you believe it. So I wanted to talk to you. The first thing I want to ask you is, I'm not like, we just hired Dean Smith, right? I'm not trying to get rid of him and get him out the door. But that story you told about Unai Emery really sticks out to me, along with the themes you talked about in that article. John mentioned he read, because I also read it, thanks to John for sending it to me. And it's all about roots and putting down roots. And the cupboard was not bare for Unai Emery. Dean Smith is a builder. He's a project builder. And like, I'm not trying to get rid of him, like I said, but I know that no matter what, he's here to build something that's going to last. He's not here for like a quick hit, quick fix. Oh, I'm going to try to make a splash and then get back to England as soon as possible. If I can just like have one or two good MLS years. He actually wants to build something here. And also, you mentioned he loves his time in the States. He's got family here. So I want to hear your thoughts on like what the long-term vision is, and how he's going to make us a better club, like all the way, especially as such a young club.
He definitely needs time, I think, first and foremost. His background is youth development. So when he was at Walsall, he was the academy coach, and that's how he got the job at Walsall, and then he kicked on from there. I think it'd be interesting to see who he brings in alongside him, and maybe some of the senior players at the club. Because often he tends to lean on those people. He's not a ranter or a raver. He's not a disciplinarian where it's his way or the highway. He's happy to listen to other people's thoughts and opinions. He wants people alongside him who will check and challenge him every single day. But he's very, very open. And what he's a big fan of are like the debriefs after the game. So if you guys are playing on the Saturday, tend to have a day off on the Sunday and then come back in on the Monday morning. I know the schedule might be different over there, but and what he tends to do is go through the game, for the previous game, and ask for players to sort of speak up and give their thoughts. It's not all about him. He wants to create a real good culture around the place, and I think that's what he did at Villa. Really, he came into a club that was struggling, but he made everybody want to enjoy going to training. He made people sort of say hello to the reception staff and just be polite and friendly and happy. And that's what you You might do that in the States already, but believe it or not every footballer in the UK does. So he's big on building a culture, and I think that's what you'll see first. But I hope he gets the time, because it's not all about results immediately. He needs time to put his philosophies across, to put some of his ways of working across, and then hopefully he'll have some success.
Well, the good news is that Charlotte FC is heading into its third season and has already had 2 managers. So the club needed to get this one right. And you'd like to think that bringing on somebody like Dean Smith and his CV, he should be given at least a couple of years, no matter what happens. And by the way, this club, Charlotte FC, was very close to having a nice season, made the playoffs, led the league in drop points from winning positions. So he has a solid base to work with. And one thing I really wanted to get into today on the show, because typically championship football in the UK and MLS soccer here in the United States are sometimes compared as the same level. Now, we don't need to debate that today. So I'm more.
Well, that is out there.
I'm going to need some of your beers if that's the case.
But I want to just understand. So when Villa is in the championship, I wanted to know how he set up his team tactically, how he played at that physical level where you don't have the most skilled players in the world, but you have really fit guys who aren't afraid to use their physicality as one of their main skills.
Yeah, I think, Villa were a club that were relegated 2 seasons before he came. So Villa had 2 full seasons in the Championship and were embarking on their 3rd. And it was a really, really important season because the parachute payments that you get from the Premier League that bump up Championship clubs, they were about to end. So, Villa really needed to get promoted. They'd just been taken over by new owners, Nassif Sawiris and Wes Edens, who were really, really ambitious, wanted to get the club back into the Premier League and up to the higher echelons in the table. So Smith came in with the task of having to get this club up somehow, and they were languishing in the middle of the table and more towards the bottom as we previously mentioned. But what he did have up his sleeve was a star performer in Jack Grealish, the absolute standout player in the Championship, but possibly the best ever player that's played in the Championship. And he really led the way. And what was interesting was the relationship that the two of them developed. So Dean made Jack Grealish the captain, which came as a bit of surprise, really, to a lot of people, because Jack Grealish isn't a vocal leader; he's a performance leader, and that's what Dean saw in him. He said, "We think that you can elevate the rest of this club through your performance," and that really worked. And just what happened as the times went by, when Jack left and moved to Manchester City, he was so complimentary of the work that he'd done to him for him, and he actually made it. He actually played a really big part in making him the player that he was, which ultimately was £100 million player. But yeah, the way he used to attack games was to play really on the front foot. He liked playing a 4-3-3 more often. That's just how it worked. He liked playing 2 sort of number 8s behind the forward players. He liked his wingers. But they did have a very strong squad, to be fair, Aston Villa. So they were expected to be up in the promotion race anyway.
Would you call it a 4-3-3 or more 4-2-3-1? I've seen people say different things, or does it even matter?
Yeah, it did vary, because in the promotion winning season, it was very much a 4-3-3. But there were occasions where he used to drop a couple of players back into sort of the double pivot role, and just depended on the opponents. Really, he was quite flexible. Yeah. There were a couple of occasions where there was one occasion where Villa went down to 10 men in the promotion winning season as well, and Dean decided, instead of sitting back because they were 1-0 down and trying to sort of soak up pressure and get the opposition on the counter attack, he said, let's fully go for it. And he played a 4-3-2. So it was just, and it worked. It was just unbelievable. It worked, and it could have gone the complete other way, and Villa ended up getting spanked. But yeah, it worked, and they won. And it was that was a part of the 10-game unbeaten run that kick-started that run.
So I'm thinking about the final playoff match at Wembley. I imagine you were there at Wembley that day. I vividly remember that match, and I think, Greg, the funny thing is that the two finalists for the Charlotte FC job were both managing in that match. Frank Lampard came over here as well, and he was named as a finalist. I remember that match as well. I was actually in Vancouver, Canada, watching that match because Grealish, at that point, Jack Grealish was a budding superstar. And obviously Jack Grealish is not somebody that Dean Smith is going to target to potentially bring over here with him.
Don't think so yet, mate. No.
But I'm curious, though.
Our owner's got some deep pockets. I don't know how familiar you are, but I don't know how willing he is to pull out of those pockets, but he can reach pretty far down if he needs to.
I told Danny if it was if our club was in Las Vegas, Nevada, we might have a chance for Jack.
Oh, definitely, 100%, He'd be well up there.
When you think about players who have played for Dean Smith in the past, that kind of is there anybody that fits into that category that is potentially considering a move stateside, who's maybe at the end of their career or level's just not high enough? And obviously, putting you on the spot with this question, but just curious if there's somebody that comes to mind.
Yeah, I'd love to have a good answer for you, but I haven't. There was a lot of those players that he had at Villa have either, kicked on to be very, very high level Premier League players in John McGinn, Tyrone Mings, Jack Grealish, Tammy Abraham, playing in Serie A in Italy. Those are the four players that have really kicked on and done brilliant things since leaving Villa, and being at Villa still. A lot of the other players retired, so you might have just missed the boat.
Well, I think you mentioned somebody, though, that I think I was hoping you might mention his name, and that's John McGinn, right? I'm not saying this year. He's obviously the captain of a side right now that is playing unbelievably well in the Premier League, but he's also 29 years old. If Dean Smith does keep this job for 4 or 5 years, at some point, maybe down the line, he could be somebody that maybe would want to finish his career in the States. And it goes again to show how important it is that Charlotte FC gives Dean Smith time, keeps him happy here, and tries to build this foundation to keep him along for as long as possible.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a little bit early for John McGinn. He's the captain of a club that are trying to get into the Champions League, so he feels like he's got a good few years left. A very good amount of years left in the Premier League, I'd say. But yeah, I get your point. Obviously Dean has he's connected to a very powerful and respected agency with lots of links to other players, and he's managed at other clubs as well in England, so I'm sure he'll have his eye on a couple of players potentially for the seasons ahead. But yeah, not really so many from his time at Villa, just because they've moved in different directions. Sorry, that's a bit of a boring answer, but it's just the honest one.
No, I'm glad.
It feeds into what I wanted to ask you next regardless, which was whether we're talking about specific players coming over or whether we're talking about how we're going to develop how Dean's going to develop the guys we have here. You mentioned he's very good with young players and turning guys into superstars. If Jack Grealish doesn't become, you mentioned parachute payments. His selling him to Manchester City was like its own kind of form of parachute payment, probably. Yeah. But he doesn't become what he is without Dino. You said that, and we have guys that we think Dean can develop. What's his way of like? Can you talk about how he develops? Because I'm thinking, you don't know our guys, you don't know our personnel, but we have a player named Kerwin Vargas, who's like a young 21-year-old winger that, I think of him. I think of Saeed Benrahma, playing for Dino and stuff like that. So player types, whether it's specific players or not, what kind of player types is he best at developing? What are his techniques for getting the most out of young players? Because we got a lot of them.
Yeah. Well, if you take Grealish as an example, he was playing almost as a number 10, and Dean put him in like a left sort of midfield position. So he almost become a left winger actually under Dean. And he said, I remember interviewing Jack and speaking to him on many occasions after that, and he said, well, I didn't really agree with the manager that he was doing this, but clearly it worked because I'm now playing my best football, and I've now earned my move to Manchester City, and a lot of that was down to Dean Smith because he believed in me, he played me regularly, he made me the captain. And there were other examples as well. There's a young winger called Andre Green who he tried to get a lot out of. I mean, he might actually be one that would potentially keep an eye on for the MLS in the future. I think he's currently at Rotherham, but out injured. Dean had a good relationship with him, so maybe he'll be one. But his man management skills are excellent. A lot of the players used to say to me he wasn't a ranter or a raver. You never hear him shouting. There was one moment which I think you might have read in my article. The game during the Stoke City game, he just absolutely let rip at the players, and then the players thought, "Wow, we have done something wrong if this guy's going as mad as this," because he's very, very calm and measured.
That's when they respect it more, is when it doesn't come that often.
100%. Look, there are managers that shout after every game, aren't they? And then the players almost become a bit numb to it because they just expect it. But if you have a very calm and measured guy that's telling you, Dean's an encourager. He's not somebody who will shoot you down all the time. Tries to pick the positives out of things. But then if you have somebody that turns it on like that, you realise, look, we've got to react. And at that point, Aston Villa did. But he's very good, sort of one-to-one man managing players. He's very straight and tells them as it is. If they're not playing, he will say, "You're not playing, and this is the reason why." It's not a case of exiling a player and keeping him out frozen and not giving him the reasons. He'll explain to him, "You're not doing what I want you to do, and until you're doing that, you're not going to be playing." And he's very fair with that. It's sort of firm but fair. Sorry.
So here's a question. Here's a little bit of maybe a little tougher press on what Dean's bringing, because you mentioned in your article he had never been sacked until he did leave Villa. He saw a meteoric rise from Walsall, Brentford, and then to Villa, right? Like he had never faced that adversity. Now he's gone through some adversity in his career, a couple unsuccessful bids to keep teams in survival. So now he's coming over here. What did he learn from that adversity after having such a high-flying, like zero failure in some ways for the first few years of his career? Now he's had a few setbacks. What does that inform with the way he's bringing it to his American adventure, as they call it?
He's learned that he can get to Augusta more often when he's not working.
He better be bringing us. I mean, damn, it is a short drive. You can get down there early in the morning, no problem.
No, it was quite funny. He did a little bit of media work over the last couple of months, and I caught him at a game that I was covering, and I said, "What have you been up to?" And he said, "Going to watch golf and playing golf." He was quite enjoying it. But no, I think on a serious note, he was probably a little bit bruised from the sackings, Villa, and then it didn't work out at Norwich or Leicester City for him. He'd never been relegated either, I don't think. Maybe once as an assistant manager in his very younger years. But look, he had time to sort of process some of the good things that he'd done at previous clubs, and he was very keen to go back over what worked well and how he was going to use that in his future jobs. And I think he's had a little bit of time to reflect, mainly on the Villa and Brentford experience, because those were the real positives for him, but also what went wrong in some of the other experiences and what to do to not make sure that happens again.
It's been fantastic catching up with Gregg Evans of The Athletic and the 1874 podcast. Danny, you know what that means? I think we have to change our podcast name to the 2019 podcast.
We're taking it all the way back to 2019, huh? Yeah.
A little bit of different history between these two clubs. Amazing to think that the game has come so far to where they're kicking the ball around in the Midlands in 1874, and here we are waiting until 2019 to get our franchise here in the Queen City. But it's been a pleasure to talk to you, Gregg. Thanks so much for joining Charlotte Soccer Show. I know you've had a long day, and anytime you're stateside, if you can hop a flight here to Charlotte, North Carolina, if you want to maybe pitch to one of your editors, you should come over and write a story about Dean Smith and kind of his American adventure. As Danny said, we're happy to host you here in town.
Oh, top guys, thanks very much. Hopefully Dean will take me to Augusta as well.
Mayor's on me.
Yep, there's the three of us, and Dino could be the fourth. He just happens to get us on the course. Cheers to you. What do you got coming up this weekend? What's your coverage look like for the next week or so? Busy time.
So it's a really big one. We've got Liverpool versus Manchester United on Sunday, which is the big one. Long-standing rivals, the two of them. Liverpool going for the title. Man United haven't had a great season. There's a lot of pressure on them. The last time the two teams met, Liverpool won 7-0. So yeah, really, really exciting games. One of the biggest games in England, of course. It'd be great to cover that.
I heard a prediction 5-1 Liverpool from a Liverpool fan, admittedly, but yeah, I don't know if it goes that dangerous, but Man City could be in trouble, or Man United could be in trouble. Excuse me.
Yeah. I mean, Liverpool are formidable at home. They've won every game, I think, this season. So yeah, an exciting day ahead.
Do yourself a favor, subscribe to The Athletic, check out Gregg's work. The entire UK team at The Athletic is absolutely phenomenal. The podcasts there as well are fantastic. So until next time, Gregg, it's a pleasure to see you, pleasure to talk to you, and cheers to you, and have a great weekend.
Take care, chaps. Thank you.
Up the villains, baby.